How was that, Lorraine?
Okay, my legs were falling asleep.
That's okay. You were able to.
I just stretch out a little bit.
The instructions, the guidance was helpful. You were able to, yeah. And it really comes down to just being mindful that you're caught up and come back to your. And every time we do that, we're deepening our concentration. So it's not even a. It's the goal isn't even to simply be mindful of your breath. That's impossible. It's just to use the breath to deepen concentration. And so every time that we find we're caught up with thought, come back to our breath, we're deepening our concentration, and that avoids frustration. You just can't do it for 20 minutes or whatever you think. How was that for you, Paul?
It's good.
Yeah, and you were able to maintain the method.
I just constantly brought myself back. But my mind would wander.
Yeah.
I'd focus on my belly. So on.
That's it. That's meditation.
Okay. Yeah, I know.
And the other 7 factors of the Eightfold Path are supportive of your meditation practice. Meditation practice deepens and you develop more concentration. You're able to integrate more of the Eightfold Path. So it's not a linear path. It's a very symbiotic path. We develop it basically all at the same time with different aspects of meaning to you. So let me just give a brief introduction to all of this. I'll preface by saying on the website there's a page for new visitors. That gets you going in the right direction. And then in the drop-down menu under Dhamma articles and talks, which is on the home page, there's a page that says Introduction to the Dhamma. And that is a series, it's a video and a couple of talks with a little bit of text that describes, again, what this is all about, why is this such an effective meditation practice, and how mindfulness is applied in this practice. So the Buddha taught a very specific application of mindfulness, and again, it's to be mindful of, to hold in mind the principles of the Eightfold Path. Siddhartha Gautama was born a prince in his father's kingdom in northern India, really, which is southern Nepal at the time, or now, it was still part of India then. And he was given everything that a king's son would have. In fact, his father really went overboard, hoping to satisfy every desire that young Siddhartha might have, so that he would stay within the kingdom. Because concern was that his son was so big and inquisitive humanity that he would leave the kingdom and go seek answers. Exactly what happened when he was 29 years old. So 29 years old, he finally left the palace grounds, and for the first time, he was walking through the town unescorted. And he, for the first time in his life, he saw a sickness, saw a man that was obviously ill. He saw a body on the side of the road, and he asked, his name was Chanda, he says, why is this sleeping on the side of the road? He says, he's not sleeping, he's dead. And since young Siddhartha had never come across anything like that, he was shielded from anything that he construed as suffering or disappointment, that he was so shocked. We live this life, and all of them end up like that man on the side of the road. And that got his thinking going in the direction towards solving the riddle of suffering. And so he began wandering around northern India, and for the next 6 years he did so, hoping to find an answer, if there was one, to the nature of suffering, and is there a way individuals could bring an end to their own suffering, their own confusion, their own deluded thinking. Along the way, he noticed the competitiveness and the aggressiveness of people. The world at the time of the Buddha, this is 2,600 years ago, is very, very similar. You could say it's almost exactly the same issues were around then as there are now. Of course, things are much more immediate, and we're much more globally aware of what's occurring. But there was just the same competitiveness, aggressiveness, violence back then as there is now. After wandering around northern India for 6 years, he studied with some of the most advanced so-called spiritual teachers of his time. 2 that were prominent were a man named Alara Kalama, and another was Udeka Ramaputta. He studied and mastered both of these teachings, and teachings were rooted in the Vedas and then later the Upanishads, which are the precursor to modern Hinduism. He studied and mastered these techniques. They both had meditation techniques attached to them. and he got immediately. So much so that both of those teachers asked their Sangha and represent them. And he rejected them both as not leading to his goal of understanding. So he continued to wander around northern India, and he started studying and developing these very severe ascetic practices, which was common at the time too. And it's said that, the Buddha talks about, he was eating a grain of rice or one bean a day, and he got so emaciated that he could touch his spine by touching his belly. He obviously eventually became very, he walked down the street one day. Let me go back just a little bit. Prior to that, he had left friend wandering around with, all seeking understanding. So he's wandering around, wandering down the road one day, and he passes out from not taking care of himself, and he rolled down a little hill into the edge of a river, and a young girl, 12-year-old girl named Sujata, pulled him out of the river, saved his life, and nursed him back to health with some rice and other common foods at the time. As the Buddha started regaining his strength, he realized that the way he was seeking understanding wasn't working. Now, remember, he was brought up as a prince in his father's kingdom. He had everything that he could ever want. He could indulge his senses continually, no matter what he wanted. And then he lived the other extreme of denying himself even the most basic human needs. And he realized that those extremes were not the path. He classified both of them as painful and ignoble. Even having all the luxuries, it was painful. When he talked about life in the world that way, he talked about it as a confining place. Now, most people would take those kind of riches that he had as freedom, but he recognized it even at an early age as confining and frustrating, because he, even at a very young age, he had an unrecognized insight into what's the value in all this stuff. And so he decided, out of this frustration from all the seeking, that he was now going to meditate until he developed the understanding that he was looking for. And he remembered a meditation that he had done when he was 5 years old. And he was equally as frustrated with what was going on around him. And he decided to sit under this tree in his dad's backyard, basically, and to be mindful of his breath until his mind calmed. And it worked. And so now, 30 years later, he remembered that little meditation method. He decided to do it again. And so the Buddha sat, or Siddhartha still, sat in meditation. The tales and legends are, anyway, any amount of time from 1 night to 40 nights. The length really isn't important. What is important is what he developed an understanding of. And what he came to grips with was his own thought constructs that were rooted in ignorance. And I'll tell you what that ignorance is in just a moment. That created misunderstanding and deluded expectations of life. And it is that led to the suffering. And it is that type of confused and deluded thinking that led to all the confusion and aggressiveness that he saw around him. So through this rather intense meditation, he came to an understanding. He came to an understanding of something called the 3 marks of existence. That all things in the world are impermanent, including ourselves, including our thoughts. That because we don't understand something called 4 noble truths, we create wrong views rooted in ignorance of those 4 noble truths. And because of those wrong views, we create a misunderstanding of who we are. The word that the old ancient Pali word for that is anatta. It's a misapplied word today, but it simply means that the views we're holding of ourselves do not constitute in reality a self. So the Buddha's teaching is recognize and abandon those views. Because we don't understand the relationship between wrong views and the impermanent world that we live in, we create the 3rd mark of existence, dukkha, or ongoing suffering. And that's a very broad term. It means anything from a mild disappointment, mild unsatisfactory experiences, all the way to extreme emotional and physical suffering. Dukkha occurs. So the Buddha awakened to something called dependent origination, which states that from ignorance of 4 noble truths to 12 observable causative links, confusion to thinking and suffering arises. His very first teaching then was to teach the 4 noble truths. And he taught it to those 5 friends that he was wandering around with in India with prior to this. Basically, the 4 noble truths, and they're presented in slightly different ways depending on the context. But the first noble truth is that dukkha occurs, and it sounds like it's a simple and almost mundane statement. But what the Buddha is now teaching is that simply as a consequence of having a human life, there's going to be unsatisfactory experiences. We cannot escape it, so we should stop trying to. And he described dukkha as birth is suffering, or painful, or dukkha. Dukkha is suffering. Sickness is suffering, aging is suffering, death is suffering. All things that we're aware of. But we strategies because we don't want to face the disappointing and unsatisfactory nature of our life. And that's the beginning of wrong views. He went on to describe dukkha in this way. Not getting what we want is dukkha, is suffering. Getting what we don't want is suffering. And then he would, sometimes there's a little bit longer elaboration on that, but he would always conclude that description of suffering in this way. And he would say, in short, the 5 clinging aggregates are suffering. And this is where you can become a little bit confused because of the terminology. It's enough to know the 5 clinging aggregates, which are form, feeling, perceptions, mental fabrications, consciousness, thinking rooted in ignorance of 4 noble truths. These are the 5 clinging aggregates. It simply describes the personal experience of suffering. And so put that aside right now. Don't try to make sense of it because you need a broader context. But one of the ways that I teach, and I learned this from reading how the Buddha teaches, is we say things over and over again, repetitively, but in different contexts. And so eventually you'll gain an understanding of what this terminology will be together. That's also why I wrote those books. So suffering occurs. The second noble truth is craving originates, and clinging perpetuates suffering. This is now we're getting to our individual contributions to our suffering and our confusion. Craving for what? Well, craving for things to be different than they are. When we don't get what we want, we crave for it. I only got 1 piece of chocolate cake. I want 3 or 4. I didn't get the job that I wanted. I got a lesser job. I didn't meet the girl of my dreams. I met someone lesser than that. I didn't get my brand new car. I had to buy a secondhand car. Life is full of disappointments. When we want life to be different than it is, we create further suffering in our lives, don't we? Or we might crave for something to not happen. We start worrying about the future. That's a form of craving. It's also known as aversion. So craving and aversion are the same thing, just different sides of the same coin. Once we decide what we need to be happy and to be safe and secure and what we don't want to have, we start clinging to those ideas. And so we've now created a mindset of how our life must be in order for us to be happy. Except that first mark of existence, impermanence. No matter how much stuff we can gather, it's all impermanent. No matter how many ideas we might become enamored with and hold in our mind, they're impermanent. They come and go. Meditation shows us that. What we eventually gain an understanding of is that since all things are impermanent, to be mindful of what's occurring and to be completely accepting of what's occurring. We learn the differentiation between acceptance and approval. Why do we accept what's occurring? Because it's what's occurring. It's simply an aspect of wisdom of a fully mature human being. A child gets upset when he can't get any more cookies out of the cookie jar. An adult, someone who has grown past that, knows 1 or 2 cookies and they leave the cookie jar alone. But most of us never gain that type of maturity for more cookies. Nothing satisfies a self-referential ego self. And this is the brilliance of a human being. He recognizes, but he taught how to recognize it in a very simple terms that any human being can develop in this lifetime. Am I giving you too much information?
No.
Okay. It's a lot of information, and I don't expect you to innovate it or even remember it all, but just to lay a foundation for what's to come. The noble truth is probably the most important one, but it relates to cessation of our own process of creating suffering is possible. We can do it. And how do we know we can do it? Because a human being did it. It's teaching us. He did it. He can do it. His teachings. Still here today. That's the reason I said before. The only thing I teach is what we found in this Pitaka, because it's the only thing that I know that I can teach my own views out of and teach what an awakened human being did. I wish there was more of that today. The fourth noble truth is that the path leading to the cessation of our own contributions to suffering, the path leading to the cessation of confused, deluded thinking and ongoing unsatisfied experiences is the Eightfold Path. This is the only path the Buddha ever taught, excuse me. And what's remarkable when you read the sutras and understand the context that I just gave you, the Buddha awakened to dependent origination. He taught noble truths, including the Eightfold Path. Everything that he would teach within 45 years of his teaching career was taught in the context of the first two understandings. That's so important because then you pick any sutta, which might not even mention dependent origination, Four Noble Truths, or Eightfold Paths, and you'll know how to apply it. And that's one of the things that we talk about a lot here. So the three marks of existence, again, are all things are impermanent. The views that I'm holding of a self are not based in reality. They're not a self. I need to recognize and let go of those views. If I do so, life is going to be aspects of suffering in that life. Does that make relative sense to both of you? Good. It's really not, and I don't mean that you shouldn't, but it's a lot of information all at once. And the difficulty that we all have in developing this is many of the teachings are so contradictory to the way we've conditioned our mind to be. And a conditioned mind is a mind that is conditioned from ignorance of Four Noble Truths. The Buddha recognized this upon his awakening. And upon his awakening, he sat off and on in meditation for about another 2 weeks, considering there's no way to teach this that is going to be able to pierce that common veil of ignorance. And if you think about a mind that is deluded, has no reference point to what's deluded, does it? The Buddha recognized this in his brilliance, and so he gave us this Eightfold Path so that we can identify, recognize, and abandon all views rooted in ignorance of these Four Noble Truths. That's the entire purpose of the Buddha's teachings. And again, then every sutta he ever gave was situational and related to that. And so this sutta tonight, Satthusasana Sutta, and you'll see how it relates to everything that the Buddha, that I just described, the foundations of the Buddha's teachings. And it's given to a senior monk, his name is Upali, who already has a profound understanding of these things. So the Buddha, because he knows that Upali always has already developed this understanding. But it's a really important sutta, and it's really appropriate for newcomers too. So let me read this. I'll just go into the briefly, and if there's any questions you have as I'm going through this, just let me know. We're very informal here. The Satthusasana Sutta is a concise. Just stop there. So I send an email, a newsletter out on Monday and Thursday, and they describe and have a link to whatever sutta I'll be teaching at the Tuesday and Wednesday class, and then the Thursday email describes what will be on the Thursday class and the Saturday class. But I should say that I put the wrong link in for Thursday's class. Did anybody click on that link for last week's? There wasn't a link for the Satthusasana Sutta in today's email.
Video.
Yeah, that was the introduction to the. Yeah. But I usually, when I'm well concentrated and mindful enough, I put the right links in there. You can sign up for that on the website. The Satthusasana Sutta is a concise sutta presented to a monk well-versed in the Buddha's teachings. He has developed understanding of dependent origination and Four Noble Truths. He has integrated the framework of the Eightfold Path. And through Upali's integration of the Eightfold Path, he has developed skillful insight into the three marks of existence. So here the Buddha is teaching Upali refined mindfulness. Mindfulness means to recollect or to hold in mind. So an important aspect of mindfulness is simply to remember that whatever we hold in mind is going to determine our experience in life. And what we associate with is another aspect of mindfulness. What we associate with and who we associate with is going to determine, to a great extent, the experiences of our life. In this case, refined mindfulness is to hold in mind and integrate the principles of the Eightfold Path as our path to awakening. Makes sense, doesn't it? And that's really the only way that the Buddha taught mindfulness. There's other scenarios that the Buddha goes through, but this is why we do mindfulness. So we hold in mind the principle of the Eightfold Path. skillful understanding of the Buddha's Dhamma clearly shows that it is as important to understand what to dismiss from mindfulness as it is to what to hold in mind, meaning the 8 factors of the Eightfold Path. So what that last line means is that we start developing concentration and start integrating this framework of the 8 Path. We begin to recognize our own thoughts, words, and ideas that are rooted in ignorance of Four Noble Truths. And through that recognition, we can simply let them go and begin to hold in mind the principles of the Eightfold Path. What we're finding out now, what the Buddha recognized 2,600 years ago, is we really can hold in mind only one direction for ourselves. And so as we develop the path, we create a situation in our lives that brings awakening to this present moment. In other words, with the right frame of mind, holding in mind the right factors, the Eightfold Path, each moment holds the potential to incline our minds towards awakening and away from ignorance and the resulting suffering from it. And that takes some time to develop, but it doesn't take lifetimes. The Buddha was an awakened human being who taught other human beings how to awaken in this lifetime, meaning gaining full human maturity. So all the legends and stuff about it takes endless eons. Please don't read that stuff. But that's all how awakening is presented. It's not something that an awakened human being taught. It's something that was later added on. Really, the reason why is that much of what occurred after the Buddha's passing was to create religion out of something that was never meant to be religious. The Buddha never saw himself as a savior, and he never taught anything that could be seen as a savior. He taught a practical way of living in reality. So this is the sutta. The Satthusasana Sutta. One day, Venerable Upali asked the Buddha, "Please provide nice teaching on your Dhamma so that I may continue to develop understanding in seclusion, distraction, ardent and alert with skillful determination." One aspect of the Eightfold Path, the 6th aspect is right effort. Let me just say what they are now. The Eightfold Path is right view. And note how the terminology implies that there's such a wrong view. Another word that we could use is skillful, or appropriate or inappropriate. But right and wrong really gets to. So the first factor is right view, and it directly addresses that problem of wrong view, or views rooted in ignorance of the way things are. The second factor is right, and it relates directly to the second noble truth that says craving and clinging perpetuate suffering. So right intention is the intention holding in mind and recognizing and craving. The next factor is called the action, and the implication is that there's wrong speech, wrong action, wrong life. Most people who start developing the Dhamma will be able to utilize the more ethical aspects most readily, and most people will see it in right speech and wrong speech. Basically, it's harmless speech. It's free of gossip. It's free of anything. It's honest speech. It's free of anything that could be seen as creating conflict with ourselves or with others. And most of us, when we start holding in mind, will recognize aspects of wrong speech. They're not sin. We're not going to be punished for those, but they'll create conflict in our own minds. And the more that we can align ourselves with the skillful aspect, right speech, right action, right love, the peaceful will be. It also supports deepening concentration. If we're engaged in a lot of the wrong or unskillful or inappropriate actions, our minds will simply be too disrupted to quiet and calm. The next 3 factors are right mindfulness, and right meditation. So the implication is that there's such a thing as wrong effort. Wrong effort, we try to attach that Buddha never took into his teachings. It's a different awakened human being. Right mindfulness implies that there's such a thing as wrong mindfulness, doesn't it? So wrong mindfulness will be holding factors that continue our own ignorance and create suffering lives. And right meditation would be in what the Buddha meditation he just did, which is Shamatha-Vipassana meditation, and avoiding other things that may be more of a distracting aspect and not lead to deepening concentration. Simple breath meditation in position, but what I'm saying is not laying down or not walking meditation as a substitute. Sitting the body down, quieting the body begins to quiet the mind, and then using the appropriate technique. So that's the Eightfold Path. Sounds like a lot, but it's very easily integrated. So the response to Upali. Upali, you know qualities of mind that do not lead to utter disenchantment, to dispassion, to calm, to direct, to self-awakening, nor to unbinding from self-referential views rooted in ignorance of Four Noble Truths. Be mindful that these, now again, Upali knows the Four Noble Truths in the Eightfold Path. The Buddha is reminding him and refining his mindfulness and putting the focus on this. Be mindful that these qualities are not the Dhamma, and they are not the Vinaya. The Vinaya is simply a set of disciplines for monks and nuns to follow. These are not the teacher's instructions. So even then, well, not even then, there was just as much confusion about what a useful path, just to put a loose term on it, a spiritual path was. There were just as many different teachers all espousing the same thing. You listen to me, I got the answers. And there was always much confusion. The Buddha's addressed that in Upali's mind, saying you need to let go of all that other stuff, focus on what you know the Dhamma to be. This is the teacher's instructions, which makes sense. If you're going to follow someone's teachings, you'll actually follow those teachings and not make them something else, which unfortunately is what a lot of has happened. The Buddha continues, the qualities of mind that you know that lead to utter disenchantment, to dispassion, and this is disenchantment with continuing to maintain wrong enchantment, to dispassion, to cessation, to calm, to direct knowledge, to self-awakening, to unbinding from self-referential views, rooted in ignorance of Four Noble Truths. Be mindful that these qualities are the Dhamma and they are the Vinaya, the discipline. These are your teacher's instructions. And that's the end of this concise teaching. So the interesting thing about this sutta is the scenario is this is a senior monk who has developed a lot of the Dhamma, but he still needs to be reminded to keep your focus on the Dhamma and not on other things. And of course, I'm not talking outside of the Dhamma, meaning, whatever we might want to do, it's okay to do that, but don't look at it as Dhamma practice. A good example might be if we do yoga. Yoga is great for many people, although there's a lot of injuries, but the philosophy is Buddha taught. It doesn't mean that it's wrong or bad or anything, but we can get very confused when we try to integrate one philosophy into another. It's best to keep this as it is, as a simple Eightfold Path that delivers what it promises. So that's this talk. Thank you for listening. I'll start with Lorraine. So what we do now is we go around the room. If you have any questions or you want to talk about your Dhamma practice or whatever, you never have to say anything. It's okay to pass. We'll start with you. So I'm so glad you came tonight. So. Paul.
Hi. What you spoke about, I have read before, listening to you and how you described it, has given me where to start, at the very least.
Yeah.
Where to begin. It's like anything else. I think it's something I'm going to keep on practicing.
Yeah.
And also, it's very important that I try and incorporate this when my regular everyday thing.
Yes.
Particularly concentration. I'll give you an example real quick. I went to work this morning and on a scale. So I took my wallet out because that's a fighting chance. So I step on the scale and I walk away and get the wallet out. 10, 15 minutes later, I went running home. I was in church that morning. I ran back to the church to see if it was in church.
Yeah.
I mean, just by not concentrating and not being aware of what I was doing, it didn't dawn on me until about a half hour later and a whole lot of panicking that my wallet was fine sitting in the office where I work. That's not good. But I can think of other examples of not concentrating and not being aware and staying in the moment. And what happened to me this morning was kind of it wasn't like saying, wow, I can just forget something that quick and go into a panic over something that if I was calm and if I was paying attention, probably would never have happened.
Yeah, but what a great example of your own contribution to dukkha, to suffering. And it was your reaction in that. And it's an understandable reaction. I may have reacted the same way. You lose your wallet, you tend to panic.
Yeah.
But that it's in that reaction that you're actually developing mindlessness. And it's because of your reaction. But you also saw that you can be in control of that. It's important to say that if tomorrow the same thing happens, if you really want to develop the Dhamma, you won't judge yourself harshly for that. And it sounds like you're not. You're just accepting this as what's occurring.
Yeah, but right now I'm kind of finding it's feeling really silly that I actually did that.
Well, even that, it's simply what occurred. And ultimately what we gain is the ability to not take anything personally, especially what we're telling ourselves. The effect of right speech is not so much what we're saying to other people, but what we're saying to ourselves. And as we deepen concentration, we start to recognize that. And all that we do is let it go. When we recognize less than skillful right speech towards ourselves, or less than skillful speech towards ourselves, we simply recognize it so that we can let it go. And you brought something else up. It takes time to integrate the Eightfold Path. That's one of the reasons why it's the only reason, I guess, that I have classes here, except that I really is so that we can do this as a Sangha, as a group, and there's an opportunity on a weekly basis, some people come twice a week, to hear this over and over again in different contexts, and so that we start integrating it. So there's study involved in this. In other words, hopefully you read the good stuff. There's a meditation practice, but there's also being part of Sangha and listening to this. Most of the teaching that you realize that you've integrated is without much effort, but simply exposing yourself to what's here and listening to it, and then doing other things. The more effort you put in, usually the more effective and quick move along. But that being said, Paul, I would be very gentle with yourself. Don't push too hard. The only way you cannot develop awakening is to stop doing this. And if you try too hard, you're going to get frustrated. And I think I said it before. Anything ever comes up, I'm always available to you, email or phone or anything like that. Be gentle with yourself. Short periods of meditation, at least twice a day. And you can certainly meditate more often if you feel like it, But again, when you're first starting out, I wouldn't get into too long of meditation practices until you develop the framework of what's going on. I'm so glad you both joined tonight.
Very much.
Yeah, that's why we're here. So. And you did you saw the schedule the schedule's on the website too. Tuesday night, 7.
Tuesday at 7:15 again. And I know Saturday was 8 in the morning.
8:30.
8:30.
8:30. And that's up to you. The Tuesday and the Saturday sanghas are usually a little bit more well attended. Like I said, 12 to 16 folks usually. If you're comfortable on Thursday night, that's fine. But Kevin knows too that there's nothing like being part of that larger sangha too. They're very warm and welcoming. It's really remarkable what's developed here in Frenchtown. I know that sounds self-aggrandizing, but it's because of who's come here that makes a sangha. It's not me. So you might want to be a part of. Just pick and choose what you want to do. Yeah. We enjoy having you. So welcome, Kevin. Good to see you tonight.
Welcome to you. I love hearing the basics. The basics, but it's the Dhamma. It's important. Great to review it and to hear it and to reconfirm it for myself. Meditate, just breathe.
Thank you. But Kevin's been coming for a couple of years now. And, all right, that's that right?
Year and a half.
Year and a half. Wow. But so you were able to see the entire Dhamma as concise, right? Because you have the foundation of it. And that's really how it works. Once you understand it, any teaching is related to the dependent origination and the Four Noble Truths. Thank you.
In the teaching, really, it's when Don goes over it, it sounds like a lot. Lots of different terminology, lots of numbers, lots of old path and forward truth. Really, it boils down to that. It's not going to be stuff added in that.
Yeah, you got a complete introduction. There isn't more to it, but there's more to integrate in a way that these other suttas, these other teachings of the Buddha, clarify what we just talked about tonight. And as you're deep in your concentration and you become more familiar with it, you'll just see how it fits. You'll have a lot of aha moments. And I honestly think it'll help you too, Paul. But yeah, always be gentle with yourself, and tell Lorraine too to be gentle with herself. Diane, good to see you tonight.
Thank you for your continually steadfast way of teaching. The only one of the things I would add, took a while for me to really catch on to what the Sangha was all about. But one of the things that's, and I would sit at home and meditate and think, this was a lousy meditation. I couldn't concentrate on anything. And some days meditation would be absolutely great, and I'd think, I'm almost there. And then the next day it would, fall apart on me again. And it was really nice to have the Sangha be here to hear other people say the same kind of things that they were struggling with as well. And that was encouraging. And it helped me to be gentle with myself too. I'm just very thankful for teachings.
That's the key, though, Diane. Being gentle with yourself.
I think
you can't in anything we do, not just in develop. If you're going to develop the Dhamma, you have to let go of judgments of yourself and the Dhamma. But even in life, there's no reason to. It's really our Western culture, which is spread most unfortunately in the world, that we think that if we're going to learn something better, our first thing is to find out where we're wrong, beat ourselves up for a while, and somehow we'll get better. And that just doesn't work. That just reinforces wrong views. So begin to depersonalize your views of yourself, be gentle with yourself, and it's remarkable how quickly you can integrate this and gain some real benefit from it and stop losing your wallet.
But I was thinking about that wallet thing example. Sometimes I have done something like that, and I've kind of learned to think about it as maybe there was something that if I hadn't gone home or if I had done something else, something different might have happened that would have hurt me or someone else or something like that. So I get so that I even am thankful when I do stuff that seems like far out there, and it also helps me to beat up on myself. Why do you do that kind of thing?
Yeah, I had that moment this morning. When the family go on, obviously my all the time was shouting. And this is I went through with a huge panic. Running home by the pregnancy, if she's still are, I dropped every one of the and it was going back to work, trying to figure out how I'm going to regain all the lost. That's that word. I just
Did you feel like that maybe there was a reason for it all? And that's what I've kind of learned is what is like that. I don't. One of the things that he talks about is this breath, and when we're breathing. That train of thought, that habitual thinking that you have. So every time you interrupt that with a breath, it loses the strength over your mind, and eventually it will dissipate.
Okay. Yeah, you'll find yourself using in a stressful situation, just reminding yourself to come back to your breath, and it'll immediately begin to to bring some calm to you. Just everything the Buddha taught is taught for a practical reason, to develop a calm and peaceful mind. When he described the quality of mind of an awakened human being, he described that mind as calm, at peace. Isn't that wonderful? And it's really what we're all seeking, except we don't understand how to get it, how to develop it. It's there for us. Okay, I think I've given out enough information for tonight. Again, always feel free to contact me if you have any questions or concerns. And we always finish our class with something called Metta. Metta means goodwill or loving kindness. And that's a very important part of practice. And it's the essence of being gentle with ourselves and with others. And if we really want to be gentle with others, we need to start with ourselves. And this is really what it's all about. So find a relaxed meditation posture. And gently close your eyes, gently close your mouth. And again, take a moment to become mindful of your in and out breath. And let that mindfulness of your breath unite your mind with your body. And these are the Buddha's words on Metta from the Karaniya Metta Sutta. This is what should be done by one who is skilled in goodness and who knows the path of peace. Let them be able and upright, straightforward and gentle in speech, humble and not conceited, contented and easily satisfied, unburdened with duties and frugal in their ways, peaceful and calm and wise and skillful, not proud or demanding in nature, lightest thing that the wise would later reprove. Wishing in gladness and in safety, may all beings be at ease. Whatever living beings there may be, whether they are weak or strong, omitting none, the great or the mighty, needy or small, the seen and the unseen, those living near or far away, those born and to be born, may all beings be at ease. Let none deceive another or be in any state. Let none through anger or ill will put harm upon another. Even as a mother protects with her life her child, her only child, bound should one share all living beings. Radiating kindness over the entire world, spreading upwards to the skies and downwards to the depths, outwards and unbounded, freed from hatred and ill will. Whether standing, walking, sitting, or lying down, free from drowsiness, one should sustain this recollection. This is said to be the sublime abiding. By not holding to fixed views, the pure-hearted one, having clarity of vision, being freed from all sense desires, is not born again into this world. Thank you all for a wonderful class tonight. Peace.